In Hypixel Skyblock, there are many different money-making methods that come from all parts of the game. But two of the most popular and contested are mining and farm. In this video, we'll be comparing these two juggernauts of the money-making world and putting them head to head, comparing their accessibility, their progression, their ease of use, their cost of gear, and finally, their cash generation to find out which money-making method is truly the best. And now, starting off with our first category, which is accessibility. Essentially, how easy or efficient it is to be able to start making money with this money making. Starting off with mining. Mining is pretty complicated and it takes a lot of steps to be able to start making some good money. You need to first get through the dwarven mines, then get to the crystal hollows, you need to grind powder, you need to forge gear. Overall, it is quite difficult to get to a point where you can start making some real money from mining. On the contrary, farming is far easier to get into and far more accessible. Pretty much anyone can start farming and make a decent amount of money, and the more they farm, the better their money making becomes. So overall, for accessibility, it's pretty obvious. Farming easily takes this one. If you're just trying to get in quick into a money making method, I definitely recommend farming. And now moving on to progression. In this category, we're essentially going to be comparing these two money-making methods based on how good and nuanced their progression is. Starting off once again with mining. Mining has a very, very good progression system, probably one of the best in the game, where you have to go through first the dwarven mines, then go into the crystal hollows, you have to grind powder, you have to level your hard mountain tree. There are so many things to do, so many things to unlock. It's just overall an incredibly good progression system that takes time to learn, but is usually quite intuitive and easy to get a good grasp of. Meanwhile, farming is incredibly linear and simple. All you really do in farming is you farm, build a better farm more, level up in farming to be able to buy better farming gear, farm more, get more farming fortune to farm more, and then compete in contests. It's really simple, which some people may like, but overall in terms of general progression, mining is definitely superior, as it is a lot more nuanced and has a lot more going on. So in all, although farming has a very good progression system, it is far inferior to mining. So in all, mining takes this second category. Moving on to our third category, we now have ease of use. Ease of use is a really simple category, like in the name, how easy is it to utilize this money-making method? An example of that outside of the ones we have is, for example, something like Kudra is a lot more difficult and taxing to grind than something like Ghosts, for example. Now, comparing mining and farming, both are relatively easy money-making methods in terms of difficulty and brain power needed, but I would definitely say that farming is far easier. If this was before the pest update, farming would win by a landslide. It wouldn't even be close, as mining requires you to dig out mining routes, move between different gemstone clusters, and overall is just a much more active money-making method than just farming in a straight line. However, since the pests were added in order to combat macroing, farming has become a little more active, but usually you only need to go and kill the pests like once every hour, so usually it's still not that big of a problem. But farming is still far easier to use as a money-making method, and if you just want to do something while shutting down your brain, then farming is definitely superior, and therefore it wins this third category, and we are now 1-2. And now we move on to what is, in my opinion, one of the more interesting and underrated categories, which is cost of gear. Surprisingly, the gear between mining and farming is actually quite similar in cost and setup. For armor, for example, a set of maxed out Mossy Fermento armor plus equipment is roughly the same price as a maxed out set of perfected Divan plus equipment. Obviously the Divan's probably going to be a little bit more expensive, but they're in the same ballpark of price. Similarly for pets, unless you want to get a Skatha pet, if you're using a Bell pet, it is roughly in the same area of price as an elephant or as a mushroom cow. However, we do need to keep in mind that for a mushroom cow, you do need to have a very high magical power in order for it to be good, since you need to have a lot of strength. So if you want to count the price of the magical power, it's going to be way more expensive. but at that point you can just use an M. So for pets, armor, and equipment, both are relatively similar, but things get way more interesting when we start talking about gear. For gear, let's first start off with mining. There are 3 main mining tools that you can really use if you're trying to make money. The first one is the Gemstone Gauntlet, my personal favorite mining tool in the game. It is just a really good item to get and a really good for your bang for your buck. Gemstone Gauntlets are incredibly cheap, but give insane stats, giving you 1600 mining speed, and also allow you to put multiple gems into. It's overall just an excellent budget mining tool, but if you really want to get into mining seriously, then I would definitely recommend getting an X655. You may say that this drill is miles more expensive than a Gemstone Gauntlet, all for only 120 mining fortune, which really doesn't seem worth it. However, the real power of the 655 comes from the fact that it is a drill, which means that you can install fuel tanks, drill engines, and upgrade modules into it to make it far more powerful. So if you get yourself a very powerful drill, then you are able to have something far more powerful than a Gemstone Gauntlet. And then, obviously, if you want to become the ultimate miner, then you want to get the Devon's drill. This is the most powerful drill in the game, but is also by far the most expensive. It's incredibly expensive and it will pretty much never make its money back unless you dedicate your life to mining. So unless you really want to become a professional miner, or if you want to go and buy it temporarily and sell it back later, I wouldn't recommend getting this drill. Now moving on to farming gear. Farming gear is a little more nuanced in a way, as when you go over farming gear, you need to determine whether you only want to get, for example, only one farming tool that you're going to use since you only want to farm one crop for money, or if you want to get farming tools for every single crop, as the price will differ greatly since there are 10 crops in the game. That makes it 10 times more expensive if you want to get a tool for each crop. Do note that you will probably eventually need to get one for each crop due to getting the need to get gold medals, but you could always do that and then sell the tools back. And then obviously you also have the ability to get the Chimera 5 Daedalus Axe, which is the best farming tool for farming mushrooms. I really don't recommend doing that unless you obviously are absolutely obsessed with farming or just want to have a Chime 5 Day Axe for other things like magic find during slayers. But overall, that is the farming equipment. But overall, that is the cost of the farming gear. It's actually quite comedic how many parallels can be drawn between these two here, as we can see that the armor is similar in price, the equipment is similar in price, the tools are actually also similar in price. The reason for that is mainly because if you look at the cheapest option, the Gemstone Drill, the Gemstone Gauntlet, and you compare it to just getting one farming tool, the prices are relatively similar. A good Gemstone Gauntlet is probably around 30-40 mil, and a good farming tool, as long as it's not a Weeto, will also be around that ballpark. Similarly, if you're going to get every single farming tool, it's going to cost you roughly 400 to 500 million coins, and getting a good 655 is probably going to cost you 500 to 600 million. And then again, similarly, a Devon's Drill is roughly 1.5 to 2 billion coins, and a Chime 5 Day Axe is roughly 1.4 billion coins, and tack on the other farming tools that you'll still need, that adds up to roughly 2 billion coins again. So it's actually quite funny how similar these two are in terms of cost. The farming gear might have a slight edge in this category just because of every category is slightly cheaper, but I can't really bring myself to give a point to farming for this. So I would honestly say that this one is a tie and both sides get a point. And now we arrive at our final category, which is cash generation. Starting off with mining. From what I could gather, the amount of money you make from mining varies, but is usually around the 30 to 50 million coin range with a high level setup, depending on what gemstone or what ore you mine. Meanwhile, farming is a much lower amount, being around 10 to 15 million coins, so roughly 3 times less than mine. However, there are a lot of extra sources of money from farming, that do bring that number up quite a bit, such as the drops you can get from pests, the drops you can get from visitors, the copper you can get from visitors, as well as the metals that you can then sell, and the Jacob tickets you get for participating in contests. These can definitely bring the amount of money from farming up quite a bit, but in all, it is pretty obvious that cash generation is easily taken by mining. It's not even close. Mining makes far more money in the end game than farming. However, earlier on, if you put in, for example, 10 hours into a farming setup and farming grind, and 10 hours into a mining setup and mining grind, then you would make more money from farming. Mining is more of a scaling money making method that makes more in the end, while farming can start making you money right from the start. However, even with all of these positives for farming, mining easily takes the cash generation category and makes far more money in terms of raw cash generation. So with mining taking this category, we end the scoreboard at 3-3, which is actually a surprising tie. So for my final analysis between these two money making methods, here's what I would recommend to you in my So for my final analysis of these two money making methods, here's what I would recommend to you. If you plan on using one of these money making methods to make a decent chunk of money and then moving on to something else such as dungeons, slayers, or Kudra for example, then I would recommend farming. It starts making money way faster, is much easier to get into, and is usually just easier and more reliable. However, if you want a non-combat related money making method that can last you for the long run, that you can do for hundreds of hours, even thousands of hours, then mining is the way to go. Mining is just far more powerful of a money making method, but it requires a much higher time investment. So really, the choice is yours, which one you enjoy more, or which one you tolerate more if you hate both money making methods. In my personal opinion, if I were to start a new account, I would get into farming to make some money initially, and then I would use that money to get into combat money making methods because I enjoy those more. But if I were to be forced to go into one or the other long term and have to make like 5 billion coins using them, I would definitely go with mining because mining scales way better in the late game. But overall, that is pretty much it for the video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have anything else you wanted to point out about this subject, please make sure to leave it down in the comment section below. I really appreciate that you guys stuck to the end. Thank you guys so much. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.